Hi, I'm Erik Bohlin, and I'm a counselor that works with anxiety and depression and addiction. I started about 20 some years ago, and I still love what I do. I love to learn about the brain and how people relate with each other. I love to teach people new skills to get them unstuck. It's very rewarding work. I work in Lake Stevens, Washington, and serve a lot of the people around this community. I love to do something called Neurofeedback, which is an EEG biofeedback of the brain. When the brain can see itself in action, it can change itself. A lot has been spoken today about neuroplasticity, which is where the brain really can learn how to do new things, that the brain is not fixed. And since the brain is involved in everything we do, having a system like neurofeedback is a game changer. The brain either is too slow, and I'm being very, very simplistic here, parts of the brain that are too slow are associated with problems focusing, attention, feeling bored, fidgetiness, even trouble sleeping. Or the brain is kind of, in some parts of the brain, too fast. It's going way too fast. It's over functioning. We can start to worry. We can overthink. We struggle with panic, anxiety, even compulsive behaviors is sometimes from the brain being too fast. That's why we're prone to alcohol or drugs, to try to slow our brains down. There's other types of brain systems that are just unstable. It's like a tippy canoe where you step into the boat and everything feels so strong. And so when the brain can see itself in action, it can learn to slow down or learn to speed up or learn to stay stable. Very similar to riding a bicycle. The very first time you got on a bicycle, you found it may be impossible to do. You might have even had thoughts, who can do this? How is this even fun? But when you're on the bicycle long enough, in fact, we know about 4 to 5 hours, all of a sudden the feedback from the wobbliness or the pedaling or the steering begins to go away automatically. In fact, the more you're thinking and trying too hard, it often gets in the way of the process of just learning. So sometimes people ask, well, how much neurofeedback do I need to do to get results? I would say closely to 30 to 40 sessions. Now that's a whole lot of sessions. But consider this, it's permanent changes. If you really want to know something well, you do it over and over, and then you have it the rest of your life. Do people do that? Often finances prohibits that, and so they often do 10 to 15 sessions, and they're happy with those results. When insurance covers it, and some insurances are covering it for anxiety or migraine headaches, you just have to check with your insurance that they go for it, and they're very happy with the results. I often call people 6 months, a year, even a couple of years later, and they say, oh yeah, they're very happy with the results, that the results were, life-changing. Many, many, many positive stories to be able to talk about. Many people have suffered brain injury, stroke, people have had concussions, memory loss, they have headaches. I get to see the good results. By about 3 to 5 sessions, the headaches usually go away. The anxiety associated with memory loss go away. I know people have driven 2 hours to get here after suffering from an injury, and they're doing really well. The more dramatic things, I've seen people with stroke who actually get range of motion, their body begins to wake up again, and they told me that they've gotten a lot of that. It makes us rethink that physical therapy is really good. I have a huge respect for physical therapy, but why not try to activate the brain while doing physical therapy simultaneously? It just works so much more effective. I've seen lots of people recover from addiction. they tell me that it's just that the cravings are just a little bit easier to deal with. In fact, they say a whole lot easier to deal with. But I don't want to overstate things. It's really important to realize people vary in terms of response, but they're very helpful. I've heard it said that it can take many, many years for people who struggle with opiates to get their brain waves back to normal while asleep. And with neurofeedback, in a matter of a few months, we can get the brain back to normal. And I think this is why we're seeing such good results. Because if your brain is getting back to a better state of mind, it's just going to make it a whole lot easier to stay sober. I've seen people who struggle with alcoholism that they're it's almost like they say that there's like their brain is emotionally hijacked, that they go hours, days without drinking, even weeks without drinking, and then something hits the fan and they just don't care. It's kind of like at this point they just don't care, they want to go use. It appears that goes away with neurofeedback. The ability to stay engaged in what your goals really are. In fact, I've lost like 50 pounds. And I really didn't even think it was the neurofeedback. I got the system, I was using it, it helped me with anxiety. I slept through the night, my memory just increased. And as a side note, I started losing weight, and I was using a 12-step program, and it just came off easier and easier and easier. And that was 7 years ago. So if there was no other reason for neurofeedback to come into my life, for me to lose weight and become healthier, I'm very grateful and thankful. So it took me about 3 years to get the courage to do neurofeedback. Why was I so afraid? Well, part of it is that my nature was to think, well, what could go wrong? How might this not work? How is this not a good thing? It wasn't until I had a friend who was both an attorney and a therapist. He said, and he was using it. In fact, he gave me a 5-minute session. And it's like, I noticed a change. And I already had read the literature. I'd already seen positive effects with my wife. But he laughed and he said, look, this is very scientific. This is much more numerical, that you could do more harm with your words than this, because we could just have a bad day and say the wrong thing. I'm very thankful to have gotten into it. There's very little downside. I think the biggest thing that people wonder about is the cost. And I think it's important to remind people that the cost has to do with my time, it has to do with the nature of equipment, but you are getting more permanent results. You're getting much more permanent results because it's learned behavior. And you won't be doing this the rest of your life. Unlike a medication, which can have some severe side effects, and I won't go into the difficult stories to share that, kind of gets my dander up. This doesn't really have the side effects that you would see. The most we'd see is a little bit too tired or a little bit too wired. And in fact, when those occur, we just move some of the minutes over to another area. So why do I use brain paint? Well, brain paint is very useful for anybody who struggles with addiction. It uses fractal geometry and sounds, which is a very rich experience for the brain. And I'm not putting down or talking about other systems when I talk about this, but I think that with other systems, since it's a little bit more linear and something either goes or it stops when you're in the system, this is just very rich. It's very unique to what each person's going through. I also like the 90 question assessment tool. That is very helpful. It helps us get about an 80% accuracy in terms of getting the right protocol for you. Some systems really focus on what are the standard that everybody should be and what are the averages, and try to train it along those lines. That's, I think, a valid way to go. This is a little bit more focused on how is your brain. Do you experience your brain as too fast or too slow or unstable? And then after each session, we really ask you specific questions. How are you feeling? And based on that response, then we know we're training in the right direction.